Welcome to the ePathshala lecture series in computer science. We are dealing with the course computer architecture. So, this module is about the basics of cache memory. So, the previous module we looked at the need for a memory hierarchy, and we looked at the characteristics of the different memories that are used at the various levels of hierarchy. So, this module will discuss about the basics of cache memories, will point out the various mapping policies and compare them, and we will also discuss about the various read write policies that are used. So, this indicates the levels of memory hierarchy that we are looking at. So, when you look at a hierarchical memory system, in order to satisfy the speed, cost and the density requirements of processors, you have registers at the innermost level which have very low access times of very little nanoseconds, very few nanoseconds. Then you have the cache where you have tens of nanoseconds, and you also may have multiple levels of caches. Then you have your main memory, then you have the secondary storage, and then you have your sequential memory devices like your tape. This tells you the speed. This slide again shows you the speed and the sizes, the typical sizes of the memory hierarchies. So, by taking advantage of the principle of locality, we are trying to present the user with as much memory as is available in the cheapest technology and provide access at the speed offered by the fastest technology. Now, as we already pointed out, the whole thing, the whole concept of a hierarchical memory system works on the principle of locality. It is effective because of the principle of locality. Principle of locality indicates that a program accesses a relatively small portion of the address space at any instant of time, and there are two types of reference principle of localities. One is the temporal locality of reference and the other one is the spatial locality of reference. Temporal locality of reference indicates that if a particular instruction or data is accessed now, it is quite likely that the same data or the same instruction will be accessed again and again. Examples are say for example loops, you repeat the same loop again and again. Spatial locality of reference indicates that when you look at a sequential code getting executed or elements of an array being accessed, you find that if one particular data or instruction is being accessed now, it is quite likely that the next one which follows it, which is closer to it, will be addressed in the next addressed by the processor next. So, this again shows you the memory hierarchy and indicates some of the terminologies that we are going to use. We talk about a hit here. Hit is the data appearing in some block in the upper level. For example, if you are looking at block X appearing in the upper level of memory, when the processor accesses it and it is available in that particular level of memory, it is called a hit. Hit rate is the fraction of memory accesses found in the upper level. Hit time is the time to access the upper level, which consists of the data. So, this involves the RAM access time plus the time to determine whether it is a hit or a miss. So, first of all you will have to find out whether it is a hit or a miss and then access the data from there. Similarly, if you look at a miss, it indicates that data is not available in that particular level of memory and you will have to retrieve the data from a lower level of memory, say for example block Y. Miss rate is equal to 1 minus hit rate, and if it is not available and it becomes a miss, then it has to be brought from the next level of memory. That gives rise to what is called a penalty. So, the miss penalty is constituted by the time to replace a block in the upper level and time to deliver the block to the processor. So, that indicates your miss penalty. So, now cache measures, we look at basically a cache memory here and look at how these terminologies are applicable and the various policies that are used here. So, if you talk about a hit rate, fraction found in that level of cache, it is normally very high that we usually talk only about the miss rate, and we also worry about the memory access time or the average memory access time, which is nothing but the hit time plus miss rate into miss penalty. So, we have already defined these terms, and the average memory access time or AMAT is the hit time plus miss rate into miss penalty. We will elaborate on all these and look at different features that can be used to reduce each of these factors as we proceed. First of all, we look at what are the measures that can be how do you define miss penalty here, and see what can be done. Miss penalty is the time to replace a block from the lower level to the upper level, including the time to present to the CPU. So, the access time is time to get the data from the lower level, which is a function of the latency to the lower level, and the transfer time is the time to take into transfer a block, which is a function of the bandwidth between the upper and lower levels. Now, when you are looking at a cache memory, there are basically 4 memory hierarchy questions that will have to be answered for any memory, to say any memory, but we are looking at a cache here. So, first of all, we will discuss with respect to a cache. The first question is, where can a block be placed in the upper level? That is a block placement problem. The second one is, once you put a block in a particular level, how do you find out whether the block is available or not when the processor makes a reference? So, that is a block identification. The third question is, suppose you have to remove that block, the block that you are looking for is not available there. So, you will have to replace a block and bring in the new block. So, how do you replace it? What block replacement policies do you use? And the fourth one is, what happens on a write? What are the read-write policies that you use? Because basically what do you mean by read-write policies here is, when you are looking at a hierarchical memory system, normally it is only a subset of the data that is transferred from one level of memory to the next level of memory. So, when you are doing a write, say for example, when you are looking at cache and the main memory, a subset of what is available in the main memory is only transferred to the cache. So, when the cache performs a write operation, what will happen to the data that is available in main memory? They are not going to be the same. There is a consistency problem there. How do you handle all that? That is your write strategy. So, all these 4 questions will have to be answered when you are looking at memory hierarchy design. So, we look at each of these problems. The first one is the block placement. When you are looking at a cache and a main memory, you know that the main memory can accommodate large amounts of data, huge volumes of data, whereas the cache is very small in size. So, the whole idea is, I want a small memory which is placed closer to the processor, which is very fast. So, I cannot accommodate whatever is there in the main memory in your cache, only a portion of it has to be located in cache. That is one problem. The second one is, you will also have to remember the fact that when the processor requests for a particular word, it is normally not only that word that is being transferred from main memory to cache. We want to exploit the spatial locality of reference. So, it is normally a block of information that is transferred from main memory to cache, because we want to exploit the spatial locality of reference. So, remember that the main memory is divided into a number of blocks. The cache is also divided into blocks of equal size, and the transfer between the main memory and the cache happens only in terms of these blocks of fixed sizes. With that in mind, we look at the block placement. So, translating the number of the size of the memory in terms of blocks. So, we now know that the main memory has a number of blocks. The cache can accommodate only a few number of blocks. So, when you pick a block from main memory, to which block in cache are you going to place this block? So, that is the block placement problem. So, there are basically 3 different ways in which you can do the mapping. One is direct mapping. Direct mapping, each block of main memory can be accommodated in only one and only one place in the cache. It can't be put anywhere else. That is direct mapping. This is done with the help of the mapping policy, block address mod number of blocks in cache. Say for example, if you are looking at block 0 of main memory goes to block 0 of cache, block 1 of main memory goes to block 1 of main memory, so on and so forth. So, suppose if the cache can hold only 8 blocks, so block 0 to 7 of main memory will go to block 0 to 7 of cache. So, that accommodates everything in cache. When it comes to block 8 of main memory, block 8 mod number of blocks in cache, which is again 8, is going to be 0. So, block 8 of main memory will also map on to only block 0 of cache. So, there are multiple blocks in main memory that can map on to one block in cache, but a particular block in main memory can map on to only one block in cache. That is called the direct mapping technique. Direct mapping is obviously not flexible at all, because you know that there is only one place where a block from main memory can be mapped onto. So, even if the other blocks of the cache are free, you cannot accommodate them anywhere else. So, there will be a lot of thrashing that happens. So, the second method is, in order to overcome the inflexibility associated with your direct mapping policy, you have what is called fully associative mapping. Fully associative mapping gives total freedom. A block in main memory can be accommodated in any block in cache. It is not that it has a specific location associated with that. It can be put anywhere in cache, which means only when the cache becomes full, you will have to look at a replacement. So, that is the advantage of fully associative mapping, which is totally flexible, but you have other problems associated with fully associative mapping. We will look at it as we proceed. So, to have a via media between your direct mapped caches and fully associative mapped caches, we look at what is called set associative mapping. So, in the case of set associative mapping, what we do is the blocks are grouped into what are called sets. So, suppose if you group two blocks together as a set, it is called two-way set associative mapping. So, the general thing is you look at n-way set associative mapping, where a set is made up of n blocks, and between a main memory block and a set, it is direct mapping. So, each block is placed in a restricted set of places in the cache to only a particular set, but within the set you have 2 blocks or 4 blocks, depending upon the number of blocks within a set, you have the freedom to place it anywhere. So, the mapping policy states that it is block address mod number of sets in cache. So, you can't map it to any other set, it can map on to only one particular set, but within the set you have the freedom of placing it wherever you want. So, this obviously is more flexible than your direct mapping, but it is not as flexible as your fully associative mapping. So, we normally say that n-way set associative mapping is the most general form of mapping, and when the number of blocks in a set is equal to the total number of blocks in the cache, then it becomes fully associative mapping, and if the number of blocks in a set is equal to 1, it is equivalent to your direct mapping. Now, having looked at your block placement, so we compare the 3 techniques here. So, fully associative, you can place it anywhere. Direct mapping, you can place it only in one place. Two-way set associative, you can place it within a particular set. Now, we will see what happens if you are looking at 8 blocks in a cache and look at what will happen to block 12 from main memory. So, if you look at this diagram, the first one shows a fully associative cache where block 12 can go anywhere in your cache. It can be located in any of the 8 blocks wherever there is space available. When you look at direct mapping, block 12 mod 8 will give you a value of 4. So, it is only it can only be placed in block 4 of the cache. It can't be placed anywhere else. When you look at set associative mapping, we are looking at two-way set associative mapping. So, there are 4 sets here. So, when you do a 12 mod 4, it gives you a value of 0. So, it maps on to set 0. So, set 0, it maps on to set 0, but within set 0 you have 2 blocks. So, it can be placed anywhere within these 2 blocks. So, that is set associative mapping. Now, once you put a block in memory using a particular mapping policy, how do you find out whether a block is available in the cache or not? How do you identify whether a block is available in the cache or not? So, now our address, main memory address, is split up into 3 different fields: a tag field, an index field, and the block offset. The offset field is used for identifying a location within the block. So, having identified a cache block is made up of a number of bytes, say 32 bytes or 64 bytes. So, having identified a block, how do you look at a location within the block? That is your offset. The index field either specifies the number of blocks if you are looking at direct mapping, or it indicates the number of sets if you are looking at set associative mapping. So, that is the index field. The tag fields will tell you how many blocks are entitled to map on to the same block or the same set. So, as you increase the associativity from two-way to four-way or fully associative, it increases the number of blocks per set, and increasing the associativity basically decreases the size of the index and increases the size of the tag. So, if you have to find a block in cache, depending upon the mapping policy that is used, first of all look at your index field, look for a block number there. If it is direct mapping, go and check in that block number. The tag field will tell you whether it is a match or not. If it is a two-way set associative mapping or generally set associative mapping, look at the index field for identifying the set that you will have to look for. Go to that set, check all the tag fields, you will find whether the block is available or not. And a fully associative mapping obviously has no index field because everything becomes a tag field. So, if you are looking at an n-way set associative cache, there are n entries for each cache index. So, it is like having n direct mapped caches operating in parallel. So, for a two-way set associative cache, the cache index selects a set from the cache and then the two tags are compared and you will have to choose one of them. Now, in comparison to your direct mapped caches, in the case of direct mapping, you anyway have the address being mapped onto only one block. So, even though there is no whether you check the tag or not, you can start reading from there. There are no comparators that are required. Whereas, when you are looking at set associative mapping, you need to compare all the tags. So, you need to have n comparators, whereas in this case you need, the other case you need only one comparator to compare the tag. And a set associative mapping will also require the extra multiplexer delay, which is required for choosing one of the tag fields. And the data obviously can come only after the tag comparison happens. Whereas, in the case of direct map caches, you can transfer the data even before the tag comparison happens. If there is a problem, you can always recover that. Now, the third question of which block should be replaced on a cache miss. In the case of direct mapping, there is no question at all because there is only one block where the main memory block is entitled to occupy. So, you simply remove that block and bring in the new block. So, the replacement policy is very trivial. Whereas, when you are looking at set associative mapping or fully associative mapping, there is a choice among multiple blocks. So, you can look at different replacement policies like random or least recently used or first in first out. LRU is one of the most popular replacement policies. Now, as the number of blocks to keep track increases, LRU of course becomes increasingly expensive and is frequently only approximated. Now, the last question of what happens when you do a write. What happens when there is a block available in cache and you perform a write operation on it? What will happen to the data that is available in main memory? So, there are basically two policies that are followed. One is a write back policy, which means you just write the data into the cache, indicate that the block has been modified by means of a dirty bit, and do not worry about main memory writes. Only when the block is being written back into main memory, look at the dirty bit and accordingly change your data. Now, this has an advantage because you do not have to keep modifying it every time in main memory, but the problem is there is only one dirty bit per block. So, you really do not know which data got modified. You will have to write back the entire data. So, if you have to come up, if you have to avoid that problem, then you will have to look at multiple dirty bits. The other technique, what you do is, you will have to look at a write through policy. In the case of a write through policy, every time you modify a cache location, you also modify it in the next level of memory. But the problem there is, it is easy to implement, but what will happen is, if you are going to modify the same location again and again, that will get written that many number of times into your main memory. So, you will have a problem with that. So, you can't really say that write through is better to implement or write back is better to implement. Write back is better to implement when you are looking at more number of dirty bits. Similarly, write through is better if you do not have the same writes happening, the same location getting updated again and again. So, in that case it may be easy to implement. The next level, lower level has the most current copy of the data always, which means it simplifies other problems like cache coherency. And normally write through is always combined with write buffers, so that we do not have to wait for the lower level of memory. The concept of write buffers here, because the main memory writes are going to take a lot of time, what we do is you bring in a write buffer here and the data is transferred into the write buffer, and from the write buffer it will be written, eventually written into your main memory. But in the meantime, the cache is ready to take in the data that comes in, and you can go ahead with the servicing of the processor's request. So, the write buffer is brought between the cache and the main memory, and the write buffer is very, very useful. So, the processor writes data into the cache and the write buffer. From the write buffer, it will get transferred to your main memory. The memory controller makes sure that the contents of the buffer are transferred to main memory. Write buffer is just a first in, first out. Typically, you can have some number of entries like 4. If it works fine if the store frequency with respect to time is far less than the 1 by DRAM write cycle. But suppose if your store frequency moves towards your 1 by DRAM write cycle, then you have what is called a write buffer saturation. Now, what happens when there is a write miss? We have been discussing about the write through policy and a write back policy when the data is available in the cache. Now, what happens if there is a write miss? When there is a write miss, we normally what we do is, do we read in the block and then perform the write, or do we straight away write into the main memory itself? That depends on what policy we use. We normally look at a write allocate policy if we are looking at a write back policy. If you are anyway only modifying the data in the cache and maintaining a dirty bit, you might as well transfer the block from main memory to cache, do it again, do the write and then maintain a dirty bit. But if you are anyway only following a write through, you are directly writing only into main memory. So, you do not do a bring in the block, no write allocate, you straight away write it into main memory. Now, if you look at cache performance, for example, you have some data given here, a 16 KB instruction cache with a 16 KB data cache. Is this better, or you are looking at a 32 KB unified cache? A hit time is given, assume a hit takes 1 clock cycle and the miss penalty is 50 clock cycles. Assume that a load or a store takes 1 extra clock cycle on a unified cache because there is only one cache port, and assume that 75% of the instructions are 75% of the memory access instructions are instruction references. Now, the data is given, miss rates are given for a unified cache and for a separate instruction cache and a data cache. So, if we apply our simple memory access time equations here, you find that the memory access time for a split cache works out to 2.05, where for the 75% of the instructions you have 1 plus 0.64% into 50 clock cycles. For the remaining 25%, it is 1 plus 6.47% into 50 clock cycles, which works out to 2.05. And if you are looking at a unified cache, it works out to 2.24. So, these are not, these are just examples to show how you can calculate the average memory access time given the number of percentage of memory accesses you have and the access times that for each of them. Now, we look at an example mapping problem that we discussed. Say for example, we have a main memory of size 64 MB, a cache of size 32 KB and a block size of 32 bytes. Now, the same problem you can apply the same concept to any problem that is given to you. So, the main memory size will help you decide on the number of bits that make up your main memory address, and based on the block size you should be able to decide how many blocks are there in main memory, and based on the cache size and the block size you should be able to decide on the number of blocks in cache. Let us assume that we are going to look at direct mapping or fully associative mapping or 4-way set associative mapping. So, in each of these cases we will see how the mapping is done. So, when you are looking at direct mapping, the main memory address is of 26 bits, the line size is 32, which means it is a you have 5 bits for that. The cache has 1024 blocks, and because of that you have, if you look at the split up here, because the line size is 5 bits, the offset is a 5-bit field. So, the offset is used only after the mapping is done. Once you have mapped on to a particular block, locating a particular byte or a word within the block is done with the offset field. So, that does not undergo any change. It is the same for any mapping policy, that is 5 bits. Because you are talking about 1024 blocks, you have a 10-bit field to indicate the block size or the index field, and the remaining part you have 15 bits that go off for your index field and the block offset field. So, the remaining 11 bits of your 26 bits will form the tag field, which means 2 power 11 blocks will map on to the same block in cache, and there are 2 power 10 blocks in cache. If you are looking at fully associative mapping, there is no index field at all, because it has a flexibility of placing the block anywhere in cache. So, there is no index field at all. So, the block offset field is a 5-bit field, and the entire remaining bits, 21 bits, form the tag field. So, that is why your replacement becomes very difficult, because you will have to look at all these. First of all, locating a block becomes very difficult, because you will have to look at all the tags, only then you will know whether the block is available in cache or not. And similarly, replacement also becomes difficult, because any of these can be replaced. So, that is why you will have to look at replacement policies like LRU or random or FIFO. Now, looking at set associative mapping, we have 4 blocks forming a set. So, you have 2 power 8 sets here. So, that is why your set field is 8. Your block field is again 5, because your line size is 32, and the remaining 13 bits go as your tag field. So, as you keep increasing your associativity, the index field decreases. So, you can see for direct mapping it was 11 and 10 here. For 4-way set associative mapping, this is a 13-bit field and this is an 8-bit field. So, when you are looking at 4-way set associative field, mapping is done to a particular set, and within that set all the 4 tag fields will have to be checked. So, to summarize what we did in this module, we have looked at the concept of a hierarchical memory system, which is needed for satisfying the speed, capacity and cost requirements. We have seen that cache memory is effective because of the locality of reference principle, which says that normally both spatial locality of reference and temporal locality of reference are exhibited by the program. When you look at cache memory or any memory in the memory hierarchy, there are 4 questions to be answered. The placement problem, where do you place a block from main memory to cache? How do you identify whether the block is available in cache or not? What happens if there is no space and you will have to do a replacement? And what are the read-write policies to be followed? So, we looked at direct mapping, we looked at fully associative mapping and set associative mapping, and we looked at the pros and cons of each of these mapping techniques. Direct mapping is the fastest and easiest to implement, however, it is very, very rigid. Set associative mapping is the most general form of mapping. These are the references. Thank you.